cute. I have those
I get
same
clients.
huh?
I said clients call in all the time, and the first thing they say is cake, please.
That's cute.
I'm recording this for you, so when it's done, I can. It'll take maybe the whole day to convert. It's not a quick process once it's done, but by tomorrow I should be able to send you over the video so you can rewatch it if you like.
That'll be lovely. Thank you.
No problem. Are you familiar with simplified acquisitions and set-asides?
Set-asides I am, but not the other one, no.
Okay. Let me show you a real quick. Simplified acquisitions, or what a lot of people call no-bid contracts, are just that. They're purchases that the government makes where they don't put it out for bid. A lot of purchases that FEMA makes now are done as simplified acquisitions because they simply don't have time to put stuff out for bid when there's a disaster. Mm-hmm. You probably remember during Katrina, there were people that said the government left us, you know, there was that one group of people stuck on a bridge for almost a week. They said the government left us here to die. They didn't do anything. The government did actually react immediately. The problem was back then, in order for FEMA to make purchases, they were dealing with the regular purchase process where they had to put stuff out for bid. You know, if you ask vendors to submit a bid, and it takes them a day or two to submit them, and it takes you a day or two to review it, and then a day or two to award it, and a day or two for that vendor to actually physically gas up their vehicles and load up their equipment and get there, then yeah, it could take 6-7 days to rescue people in that case. So FEMA purchases are done a lot differently now, and you'll see in the grand scheme of things, there's a lot more simplified acquisition purchases now than there was even 4 or 5 years ago. I'm going to send you over this fair share document, but if you look on the 3rd page, simplified acquisition purchases have actually gone up in the last 3 to 4 years, and some areas as much as 200 to 300%. Back in 2010, there was only about 10% of the contracts that are being done were done as simplified acquisitions. By 2014, it was up to 30. So in every arena, simplified acquisition purchases have doubled, and in some areas even tripled. Now, the way simplified acquisitions work is actually real simple. They can make purchases without putting it out for bid. They don't have to get a second quote, what used to be called the rule of 2, where they had to get a second quote or they couldn't award it. The rule of 2 is no longer mandatory. And a lot of times on simplified acquisitions, they'll prepay. And this is why. The Obama administration passed something called the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. I think it was back in 2010. And the main thing about that, to save the economy, they guaranteed at least 23% of the federal budget to small businesses. By June 6 of 2012, it's my son's birthday, so I wouldn't forget it, Obama sent out this letter to all the purchasing and procurement agents, top deputy secretaries, all the way down to the small business directors, and said, look, in a nutshell, if you're not going to do 23% of your budget with small businesses, we're going to cut your budget. And most of those agencies replied, might as well go ahead and cut it then, because it's literally impossible to do 23%. And the Obama administration said, why? And the purchasing agents said, well, number one, and the biggest number one, the threshold for those contracts, the top of the highest amount that they could award those contracts was up to $25,000. Okay. Now, you're asking an agency with $100 million budget to do $23 million of that with small businesses, and they have to do it $25,000 at a time. That's a statistical nightmare. That's right. It would take so many purchasing agents, so many employees to do $23 million, or even worse, if they've got a $5 billion budget or a $100 billion budget, and they got to spend 23% of that with small businesses, and it has to be done $25,000 at a time. That's impossible. So they increased that threshold several times. The threshold now for small businesses, women and minorities, is actually up to $8 million in some cases. And I'm going to show you these contracts in a minute so you can see them. But increasing the threshold is great and all, because it means they can do larger contracts, but you're still talking about small businesses. Small businesses can't afford to do an $8 million contract. They don't have that kind of working capital sitting around to do that kind of work. So the Obama administration came back and said, okay, then in order to make sure they have the working capital, on some simplified acquisitions, we'll prepay. We'll pay a deposit or half or the entire amount up front if we have to. And the purchasing agent said, great, that'll make it much easier to hire small businesses. But there's one more problem, that rule of two, where they have to get at least 2 quotes. You're talking small businesses. There's not a lot of them registered with the federal government, and sometimes there's not a second small businesses that's registered in the service area to get a second quote. So if they can't get a second, how are they supposed to compare the price and make sure it's fair if they're not getting a second quote?
Exactly.
But that's a problem. So the Obama administration said, okay, I'll tell you what, then if you can't get a second quote, if the rule of two cannot be met, as long as you compare an analysis of the data in the federal procurement data system and make sure that price is fair based on what we've paid in the past, then you can award a contract with only 1 quote as long as their price is fair based on what we paid before. Okay? Now, because these contracts aren't put out for bid, you can't go look at a list of them because they don't put them out for bid. There is no list of them. Fortunately for you and I, they do show these contracts when they're awarded to a woman or minority or veteran 8A or HUBZone, because they have to prove that they're hiring small businesses and women and minorities in 8As and HUBZone. So occasionally they'll award one of these to a woman and they'll post it in the FPDS to show that they're hiring women. Does that make sense? So you can look at these contracts once they're awarded if they were awarded as a set-aside. So let's look at set-asides next. Set-asides are contracts that are set aside for small business or minority, woman, veteran, service-disabled veteran, 8A or HUBZone. These are the set-asides from 23% small business to 5 minority, women, veteran, 5 8A, 3 service-disabled veteran, 3 HUBZone. Women, unfortunately, right now are getting the shorter end of the stick because of the number of competitors. Okay, excuse me, that's minorities. Women get the same 5% that veterans and minorities get, but there's 69,000 women-owned businesses sharing that 5%. Okay? Minorities are up there too. There's 62,000 minorities sharing that 5%. Veterans are in a much better position because they simply have almost half the competition that women have. You see that? And as a service-disabled veteran, you're getting an additional 3% on top with only 16,000 people sharing that. Now, as a minority and a woman, you can qualify for an 8A. Once you've been in business and you have the past performance to back it, you can qualify for an 8A. And that 5% is the same 5% you're getting as a woman, but there's only 5,300 8As worldwide. There's less than 1/10 of 1% of the competition in the 8A program that you face in the woman-owned program. Does that make sense? Okay. 8As, most 8A contracts are not put out for bid. They're done as simplified acquisitions because there's not enough 8As to even bother putting it out for bid. They do them as what's called a sole source or a single source, where they would just call you or email you, and if your price is fair, they would hire you. And a lot of times there's not another bid received. The rule of two is no longer mandatory. They don't only get 1 quote, so there's no competition on those contracts. But you got to be in business at least 2 years for the 8A. You got to have past performance. Doesn't have to be government past performance. It could be regular, you know, just your regular clients. So you could qualify for an 8A at this point. HUBZone, on the other hand, is much easier to get into. It's a much easier program. It's much easier to qualify. You just have to be in a HUBZone, and 35% of your employees have to live in a HUBZone. And HUBZone is important because, again, less than 1/10 of the competition of these other programs. And this number is actually incorrect. They kicked some more people out of this program for not staying compliant. So that number is actually, I believe it's less than 4,100 right now. If you look in the grand scheme of things, okay, right now in SAM, there's 1.2 million for-profit vendors. Over 900,000 of those are inactive. That means there's only 340,000 active for-profit vendors in SAM right now. And more than half of those are big business. More than half of those are the IBMs and Raytheons of the world. but let's say half are big and half are small, just for argument's sake. That only leaves about 160,000 small businesses that are active in the system. 160,000 small businesses compared to almost 30 million small businesses that are registered in the U.S., that's nothing. It's a drop in the bucket.
Mm-hmm.
And out of those 160,000 that are active, our organization, U.S. Federal Contractor Registration, has done 80,000 SAM registrations. We're technically
Mm-hmm.
responsible for half the small businesses that are active that are selling to the government right now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So this system, as far as being a small business and selling to the government, is a no-brainer. I teach people to broker contracts as a startup company. One-man show, working out of her home, and she's winning. She won her first bid. This happens every day. All right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, a lot of this sounds too good to be true, right?
Somewhat.
If you were telling me this, I would say, you know, this sounds way too good to be true. Is there any proof? Yes. As I mentioned earlier, when purchasing agents hire women and minorities and veterans and 8As and HUBZones, they post those contracts in a system to show that they're hiring those set-asides, and we can actually look at that system. It's called the Federal Procurement Data System, fpds.gov. I'll email you all these links and documents so you don't have to write it all down, fpds.gov. So, for example, let's say computer. Okay, there's 3,250,000 contracts in the system right now under computer.
Mm-hmm.
If we look, most recently awarded was the 19th, was yesterday. That one was awarded yesterday. So these are all awarded yesterday. Mm-hmm. Now, out of those, these are the ones that were done as simplified acquisitions, the ones that were not put out for bid. They didn't have to have the rule of two. They probably prepaid. So this one's awarded yesterday for $10,000. Click the view link. See where it says current? And then it says total.
Mm-hmm.
That means they're going to be paid the $10,000 up front.
Mm-hmm.
So they won't be out of pocket any money. The government will pay them the entire amount up front. So they have the working capital to do the job.
Okay.
This was done as a simplified acquisition, and there was 4 offers received. So they did, in fact, get more than one offer on this one. They more than likely reached out to 3 other companies, and the price that they got they didn't think was fair. And then they contacted this company. The price was fair. They hired them. That's simple.
Okay.
Click the back button.
What kind of person is this? I mean, woman, minority?
These guys are they are not anything. They're not woman, minority, veteran, 8A. They're just a small business with 12 employees.
Okay.
Some NAICS codes, what's called the size standard, the requirement to be a small business under some codes is by employee number. So under some NAICS codes, you can make as much money as you want. As long as you never hire more than 500 employees, you're considered a small business. So under some codes, you could be a small business forever, regardless of how much money you make. This one was awarded yesterday for $45,000. They haven't been paid on it yet, so it's not showing anything current because it was just awarded yesterday. This company is not a minority, woman, or veteran owned.
Where you see that at?
It'll say right here under business types, it'll say woman, minority, veteran, but they're none of them. See right here it says simplified acquisition.
Mm-hmm.
And look how many offers received.
Right. Mm-hmm.
There was no competition. This contract was awarded to this company for $45,000, and there was no competition on it. If we go by action obligation and see the largest contracts awarded, there's one for $151 million was awarded in 2015. There's one $82 million awarded in 2016. $151 million contract. Done as a simplified acquisition. Look at how many offers received.
What is this one doing?
It says Microsoft below the line for GSA, so it's some type of Microsoft software, I would assume.
Oh, okay.
But one offer received.